Testing, testing. Hello, hope you're well. If you can just let me know that you can hear me and that you can hear Ableton, that'd be great. So yeah, I can hear me, and if you can hear, let me know you can hear Ableton. That would be great. And then once someone lets me know that, we can get on with today's masterclass, which is about making beats. Let me just grab some coffee while I'm waiting for you to reply to this and let me know. Wicked, that's great news. Sorry, grabbing my coffee. Caffeine needed today. Okay, so today I'm going to start putting together a beat in Ableton. Right, so got this open here, and I've moved recently as well, so I haven't found the hard drive yet with my sample library on it. So I've had to I've got samples on this computer, but they're not. I normally use an external hard drive for my sample library. So today I'm just finding samples by searching the whole computer in all results. That's something that's really, really handy. If you don't know where something is, you can just go to this section here, all results, and search for stuff. So I could search WAV, because I want a WAV file. I can press beat like that, and then I'm going to get any WAV file named beat. Or I could just put beat in without the WAV. That's going to bring up everything named beat, but obviously that, I'm looking for the WAV files. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start thinking about how I'm going to build a beat in Ableton. So something that I like to use quite a lot is just simpler in Ableton. So if I double click on this MIDI channel on the top here, and it says drop an instrument or a sample here, then I can just find a beat that I like. So I quite like that kick in that beat. Okay, some other stuff going on there. Let's see if we can use it as it is though. Drop that in like that. So I've just double clicked on the top of that there, and I've dropped that into there where it says drop an instrument or sample here. Let's just have a little listen to that first beat. So I'm just using the arrows here to edit the sample point. I'm just going to put a kick pattern on C3 here. So sorry, my Ableton does this thing, and it's actually, doesn't do it normally, but when Skype's running as well, and OBS seems to do a thing. Okay, so that's a kick drum off that beat. It does this thing where I get the wrong icon. Get the wrong icon for what I'm wanting to do, so it can be a little bit confusing. So if I hover over that and I want to stretch that out, I should get the stretch icon. And now the stretch icon's there, and it shouldn't be the stretch icon. So just bear with me. It's a little buggy thing that happens with my Ableton for some reason. So look, there's my kick drum that I've basically ripped off that loop. So I've just gone into that loop there. I've just edited the first part of that kick drum. And I could make that a bit longer if I wanted for a little bit more. So I don't want that. That's quite nice. And I'm just going to make sure that I edit the kick so I don't get that hi-hat in there. And I'm actually going to make sure that warp is off, which it is anyway. I'm just going to leave that there, and I'm going to use that kick drum as my main kick drum in my track. So I've just found that kick drum off a loop. There's loads of loops with good kick drums there. I'm getting a little bit of a click there, so let me just actually, let's try the filter on this. So I've got a filter by default on simpler. So if I turn that down a little bit, that's going to take some of those high frequencies off. Or I could use the release and the decay just to smooth this out a little bit to try and get rid of that click sound that I don't want. So I quite like that as it is. Kind of works for me. So I've got that kick drum. That's my basic 4/4 house pattern kick drum there. As you can see, I put it on a C3. I can also play this kick drum on different pitches if I want, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So next up, I'm going to use the core kits in Ableton. Now the core kits are really actually quite handy. So I'm going to go into my drums here. I'm just going to go to, I'm going to use a 909 core kit, and I'm going to use 2 instances of that. So I'm going to put one in there. I'm just going to copy that channel out by holding Command and D, and that copies the channel out. And I'm going to put a MIDI clip in here. And I'm going to start off with my classic 909 clap. So I'm going to put it in there, and then I'm going to put MIDI clip in there, and I'm going to start off with my classic 909 open hi-hat. So that's me. There we go. So now I have a basic 909 beat. So you know what, I'm going to change this kick drum because I'm not happy with that hi-hat coming in, and the filter doesn't seem to work. So I'm going to just go in here and put in house beat, and I'm going to go to all results again here, or house WAV, I think it was. I'm going to try putting that one in instead. So I'm going to drop that into my simpler again, and I'm going to edit this down like this. Not bad. Could do better, so I'm just going to try and find a nice loop that I like the beats off. So let me do house again. That's the one we've got already. So let's try techno. So I'm just looking for a nice kick drum. And there we go, I'm getting the circle of death. Okay, that's quite a nice punchy kick drum, so let's drop that one in there like that. And once again, I'm just going to edit this. So we have just that first portion of the kick. Turn the volume up a little bit on this kick. Okay, so we got the beginnings of a beat here. And then I've just got to make sure that I turn everything down because I'm getting a little bit of clipping on the master here. So if I hit Shift and select the tracks together, I can use the fader to turn everything up, down together. So I select the first track, and then I select the last one, and then I hit Shift and start moving things up and down like that. Okay, so that kind of works for me. So now I'm going to think about making a drum rack, and I'm going to make a percussion kit inside the drum rack. So I can use lots of different loops to make a percussion kit. So let me create a MIDI channel here, like that, and I'm just going to go to my instruments here, and I'm going to go to drum rack. So now I'm just going to drag an empty drum rack across like that, and I'm going to just type in here perk, and I'm just going to find some perk loops or one shots that I like in my samples here. Let's get a loop, see if we can find perk loop. It's going to come up. No, is it? If only life was that easy, but okay, let's go bongo. Okay, some nice sounds in that, so I'm just going to drag that into a few instances of that into my drum rack there. So let's just say 3. So we're going to use 3 individual sounds off that for now into my drum rack. So now we have these separate bongo, so same sample, but we're going to edit out different things. So I'm just going to go into here, and I'm going to take that first hit there. I don't really need to do much editing on the first hit, but I can maybe look in there, just make sure it starts at the right point. So I can zoom in here by using the arrow, and maybe I'll just move this in so it's more like that, so there's no silence there. Really important to get the start of your sample at the right point. Otherwise, you're going to end up with something that sounds out of time. So now I have, so that's now. So now we've taken that one hit. I like that, so let's use that. Now I'm going to do the similar thing to the other, same sample, but I'm going to take different parts of the hit out. So now let's have a little listen to what this is here. I can play it with the play. I actually quite like this one here. Let's have a little listen. So let me get that end point first. Just going to get the end point here like this, and I'm just going to zoom that in, and let's have a listen to that first. That's quite nice actually. What about this? That's nice. This one here is nice. And then I'm going to do a similar thing to this sound that I really like from here. And so once again, I'm going to zoom in. And I'm just going to really zoom in again. Make sure that I haven't chopped anything off the beginning here. And then let's have a listen to these. So we can start building our own percussive rhythm out of the samples that we have chosen here. So let me just mess around with this until I've got something that I'm a bit more happy with. Okay, so that's kind of a reasonable percussive groove. So now I'm going to add a little bit of groove to this by using one of the things that's already in Ableton's Groove pool here. So I'm going to select the MIDI here. I'm just going to select it all just in case I don't need to, and I'm going to hit this hot swap here thing on the groove. It opens all the groove presets. So I'm just going to go to percussion, and then I can preview that, and if I double or drag that down or double click on it, that's going to put it there. I can commit that, and I can see that that's changed the velocity and the timing of my percussion now. Let's have a little listen to that now. So that's made it sound a little bit more human, I think. I'm just going to add a little bit of reverb to that now. Okay, so I quite like that. And now I'm going to just expand these patterns so they're a little bit longer, so there's a little bit more going on. At this point I'm going to name the pattern, so this one here is my kick, or name the channels I should say, and this one here is my clap. Just going to keep everything nicely named. My hi-hat here, let's just call it HH for simplicity, and then have a listen to these together. So we've got a very kind of classic house beat coming together here. Now I'm just going to check in on YouTube while I'm here actually, just to make sure that we're still running, that everything is sweet. Okay, yeah, seems to be running just fine, all good. Okay, so let's crack on, shall we? Okay, so here we go. I'm going to press play here. Sounding good. So right now I'm just going to expand these patterns out. We've got everything named. I'm going to add a little bit of variation to them. So I'm going to take this kick and I'm just going to go to duplicate loops. I think it's very handy. I'm going to make this a 4-bar loop and I'm going to add an extra kick here. And I'm going to just bring the velocity down to that. We'll do the same thing at the end of the 4 bars, but maybe keep the velocity a bit higher on that one. And now our kick drum sounds like this. So just added a little bit of variety into that kick. I'm going to do a similar thing with a clap. So this at the moment is this length. Gonna duplicate that loop out here. Gonna make that 4 bars, and I'm just gonna add an extra clap in there. So it's and then similar thing with a hi-hat, just duplicate that loop out like that. And just add a double hi-hat loop with no extra hi-hat in there maybe. Bring the velocity down a little bit there. So we've got a little bit more of a groove going on. Okay, so now I've done that, I'm going to think about adding maybe a sliced loop over the top of it. And for, you know, some of this stuff will be discussed a little bit later in the course, but I like to try and you know, add some extra things that we can do now to create some beats. So I'm just going to find a break beat that I like here, and I'm just going to go to all results again and find a classic. Okay, so that's a classic breakbeat. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put that in as a loop. Then I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to go to control and click on that and go slice to a new MIDI track. And that's going to, I'm just going to leave it on transients and built in, and that's going to slice that beat up into its sections. So I'm going to hit OK there. And then I've got no idea why my computer's being so slow at the moment, but I have to have a look at that. Okay, so right, now we've got this sliced up. Now we could do a couple of things. I could either just play it back and edit it like how it is, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the bits that I like of it and create my own pattern with it. So I've got this nice beat going on. And then I'm going to just drop a MIDI file in there, and I'm just going to find some of the slices that I like. So I like that, for instance, so I could just put a little bit of a groove on that one. Turn that down a bit. Okay. Maybe the shorter slice up here is nicer for me. Okay, so that works for me, and then maybe try and find another slice we could use. Maybe I can use that on the offbeat, that. Okay, so I'm not sure about that kick drum, but everything else seems to be kind of working. Okay, so that works. That's my break. I've taken that out of my breakbeat. Okay, so now I just want to. Okay, so we can use. It's all cool using standard drums rhythmically, but let's maybe think about using something vocally rhythmically as well. So I'm going to put Vox in like this. So I'm just going to grab this and I'm going to put this into, should we use a drum rack or a simpler? Actually, I'm going to use decisions. Right, I'm going to use a simpler, so right. Let me create a simpler there. Insert MIDI track. And let's double click on the top of it here and let's get this vocal sample here. And I'm just going to make sure that I've got the first part of that sample there. And then that is now mapped out across my keyboard, so I can, hold on. And so I can start creating my own little rhythmic parts for this little vocal. Classic kind of high pitch sample. Obviously, with a little bit of playing around, I could get that to sound better, or we could just drop another vocal in there. So let's try that one instead. Similar thing, let's sample that. We've already got the MIDI, and sometimes you could just change the MIDI around. And you can have things that sounded very different before, sounding Okay, so I quite like that one up there. And now you can just kind of, we've started building something which is kind of quite nice. I'm just going to add some delay to that as well, that vocal. And now we can just start thinking about how we could layer these drums together. And we're kind of beginning to make a beat from some of the core kicks, some stuff that we've extracted from pre-existing loops, and just use one hit of, a couple of vocal snippets. And using these methods, you can quite quickly build beats in pretty much any genre. It doesn't have to be house. You can use the same methods to start and put together, trap beats or pop beats or rock music beats or whatever. Obviously, they're going to sound quite electronic and sample based using this method, but it's going to give you a nice starting point for a track, a nice pad where you can start building your track from. So now it's time for your questions, guys. Can you shut the door, please? Right, so yeah, I think what it's trying to get at about factory loops is you can't make a whole track out of factory loops. So if you're obviously using simpler or sampler, that's using an Ableton instrument. So it doesn't really matter what your source material is. Also, if you want to use a couple of factory loops in your track, especially if you're going to edit the audio and you're going to, use some effects on them and that kind of stuff, that's fine. But I think what they're trying to get at is that you don't basically make a loop pack banger, and just do something fully from loops. Hopefully that explains that. And just save this as well and change the BPM. It's 120 BPM. I'm going to make it 124 BPM actually, and let's call it save set as. I'm not going to save it there, so I'm going to save it in extra space, and I'm going to save it as Masterclass August. And what I'll do in the Masterclass, I'll just like build on this track basically. So next week we'll look at some bass and beat melodies and that kind of thing. Save. So this is something that's good. I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to go to something that's really important that you all learn how to do this actually. Is save, and then go to collect all and save, and make sure all these yellow boxes are on, and then hit OK. And then it will copy all those samples into my project. And okay, so it's copying all them in. And now, if I want to send that project to anyone else and them to have all the samples, then I need to zip up the whole project. So this is what I want to zip up, this whole project file here. So I can press that, and that's what I send when you're uploading your projects. You can see that you send that whole masterclass project zip, and it should be megabytes. If it's kilobytes and not megabytes, then you probably haven't included the samples. Right, so what are the pros and cons of using multiple tracks, each with simpler device vs putting everything in a drum rack instrument? Right, so for one, I think that it's good practice, although drum rack is amazing, especially maybe for breakbeats, it's okay to use a drum rack, but I think it's very important that we get into the practice of doing one drum sound per track. So one clip per drum sound, one track per drum sound. It just makes life a lot easier when you're arranging stuff, when you're putting stuff together in, when you're mixing stuff, when you're compressing stuff, and just in the final, when you get to final stages of putting your track together, it's going to make things a lot better if you've got one clip per drum sound and one track per drum sound. So that's something you've got to get into the practice of. As far as advantages of simpler over drum rack, well, drum rack is it's a player for playing one drum sound per key on the keyboard. Whereas if you're using simpler, I can then play my drum sounds across the keyboard. So if I've got, it doesn't work so well for kicks, although it can do sometimes. But for example, if I've got a clap, I can then play it higher up on the keyboard. Here's my kick. See, I can play that higher up on the keyboard, lower on the keyboard, which is obviously quite cool for certain things. Same with this vocal I sampled here. You can play it across the keyboard. But obviously things like percussion, and like I said, maybe breakbeats, you can keep everything on one channel in a drum rack as well. So it really depends what you're doing. But when I'm arranging, I really want to see kick, clap, hi-hat, percussion, breakbeat, and have all these things on their own channel, rather than having all my drums in one channel here. It can become pretty tricky if you do that. Can we use drum sounds from other sources? Right, so you can't use third-party instruments. You have to use instruments inside Ableton. So if you sample the drum from another source, that's fine, but you can't use plugins, which aren't Ableton plugins. So you can use audio or Ableton instruments. If you start using third-party effects or third-party instruments, then you're going to run into some trouble. Sorry, my kids are gate crashing. Babe! Babe! Joshy's in here. Joshy's in here. Sorry, it's summer holiday, so my kids are gate crashing the masterclass. So if you want to introduce a swing, then you use the groove pool. That's a great way of introducing swing. Rather than going to the grooves in your groove pool here, so if I go to here and I want to introduce a swing, then I double click on the clap there, and I go to this hot swap button, and you can see here there's swing and groove. So you have kind of classic MPC swing in here, which is from obviously the MPC sampler. You have swing from different old bits of kit, and then you've just got a classic swing setting in there. So yeah, you go into the hot swap mode of your groove and then select something like that. And also remember that groove isn't applied to your sample, you can hear it, but you can't see the MIDI until you hit apply groove, or what's it actually called? It's not apply, commit groove. That's the one. So once you hit commit groove, then that actually imposes that groove onto your MIDI itself rather than affects the MIDI. So you can still hear it if you don't do that, but it's not permanently committed to your MIDI pattern. So you can't really edit it and stuff like that and see what's going on. So I recommend that you do commit your groove when you need to. Do you use swing and groove on drums? Yeah, so I mean I use a little bit. Obviously I make more techno based music, so there's less swing in techno than there is in house and garage and styles like that. But I do use a little bit. But I kind of like to keep my kick and my claps and my hi-hats quite robotic. Also be careful about using groove on kick drums, because if you don't get it right, you can make your track very hard to mix for DJs and get your drum to be clashing with other drum loops and stuff like that. But all the rules are there to be broken. But as a general rule, I would say avoid, if you're making 4/4 music, putting groove or too much groove on your kick drums. Yeah, we're going to be going into lots of detail about sampling and synthesis later on in the course. But I like to introduce it a little bit earlier just to get people using it. It's quite easy to use the basics of before you start going into the more complex features. So I'll be using it this week and I'll be using it next week as well in my masterclasses. Right, so what you're talking about is send and return reverb. So right, this comes from the days of analog mixing desk, where you would have only a limited amount of, if you have a mixer, you can't go out there and buy unlimited reverbs. You can't buy a reverb for every channel on your on your mixing desk. So you probably have 2 or 3 reverb units. Now you put them on an auxiliary send and return, and what that does, that sends a copy of this track or whatever track down into another bus, and that bus has got reverb on it. So now I can add the same reverb, this reverb that's on there, to any of my instruments along there in parallel. So it's another way of using reverbs, and it's good for your standard reverbs that you're going to use across your whole track and stuff like that. So, and it gives you more of an ability to kind of mix your reverbs as from your mixer, rather than having to go into the track and adjust everything there. So it's a good way of using your kind of your standard, your utility reverbs and your utility kind of delays that you're going to use over and over again throughout the track. So yeah, that and then obviously if you put them on the channel, you're using them in series, so it's a bit different. So hopefully that explained that for you. Right, so yeah, I mean, it's good to group all the drum tracks together, especially with the new drum rack. What's it called? Not drum rack, is it? What's it called? The new effect that is audio effect. The drum bus. That's it. So yeah, I mean you can do some cool stuff with the drums with that drum bus. So if I put all these together in a group here, let's group them all together and just call that group drums, for example. And I'll put this drum rack, this drum bus on it. Sorry, I can obviously do. Fatten it up like that, crunch it up, boom it up. So yeah, you can get quite a strong analog sounding drum bus. Change the. I mean, you could do. Obviously, that's extreme and doesn't sound great, but. You can get things sounding quite strong. So that's quite, from that to that, it's quite fat already, right? Yeah, so for me it sounds a lot more like it's coming off hardware or an analog desk like that. Yeah, so you can have a lot of fun with that. Yeah, so good. Let's just say good. So yeah, and there's other reasons why you group them together as well. Right, so do you layer claps, snares together, or one should be enough? Actually there is normally a few going on together, but quite often there's just one as well. So it depends. If you've got one that sounds great, then that's good enough. But if if you get stuff layering up and it sounds better because it's layering, then that's also good. So I mean, I don't think there's. I think I work both ways, you know. So yeah, sometimes, especially as I'm using hardware as well, and when I'm doing my live stuff, there's quite a lot of layering going on, and you know, it seems to work. Seems to work layering, but you know, if you've got a great drum sound in the first place, then maybe you don't need to layer it. So there is no right answer, like many things when you're creating music. But for me, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Okay, guys, we've got loads of time, so just come and hit me out with questions. I don't believe that that's all the questions you have. Does grouping change anything about how session view works? Doesn't really change how it works, but it does kind of change. It does change how things are accessible, I suppose. So, I mean, I find when I group too much stuff together, I find it kind of hard to access things that can get a little bit confusing. Although some people, I think, find it does the opposite and make things a little bit more logical. But sometimes you can find that like loads of stuff gets buried in groups, especially when you've got your group like this, and you've got all your groups minimized. So yeah, I mean, I don't think really affects how it works, but it does affect how you access stuff. So it can make, for me anyway, if I group too much stuff and I've got loads of groups going on, it can make things a little bit overly confusing for me. But I think other people they find it make things easier for them to use it. So I mean, it depends on, if you're someone that gets on really well with groups. Some people I know can just have everything in groups and they find it really easy to access everything. Whereas me, if I've got loads of stuff in groups, I just find that constantly going like this, expanding, just adds another layer of visual confusion to what I'm doing. But, it depends again. So I tend to use groups only when I really need to use groups or when I can benefit from using groups and affecting everything together. Um, Whereas some people use them as a kind of general organisational tool, I think. So do I EQ my drum groups? I mean, I like to EQ my drums together, really, to be honest. So, separately. So I EQ all my drums separately, and then I don't tend to put an EQ on the group unless it's an EQ that I'm going to automate, maybe for creative purposes, and maybe I'll put an EQ on the group that I'm going to automate, something like that. But as a general rule, I don't EQ the group together. I EQ all the individual drums. But once again, if it works for you and you can get it to sound good that way, that's a equally valid way of doing things, I suppose. Right, do you tune kicks and pitch percussion? Right, the short answer is no, I don't really, because I make house and techno. So the first thing that I do is normally start with a good kick drum. Once I've started with a good kick drum, I kind of tune everything. I suppose roughly tune everything to that kick drum by ear. It's probably not always in perfect key, but it works with the kick drum rather than doing things the other way round. So I think if you're going to start with a bass line, then yeah, you're going to want to tune the kick drum to the bass line. Now I know loads of people that do tune their drums, and they do a really good job of it. But one thing to watch out for is that sometimes you can ruin a kick drum by changing its pitch, for example. It can sound amazing, it can have like a really nice subby sweet spot, and then you change that and you're changing the fundamental peak so you can, have something that doesn't sound as sweet or nice or bassy or boomy or whatever. So I tend to go and find a kick drum that sounds amazing, and then try and work the track around that, rather than the other way around. But I know people that are really, really, um, they're really, really strong on tuning everything, all their drums, all their tuned percussion, anything that can be tuned, um, they will tune. So I mean, it just depends if it works for you. But you remember a lot, people didn't do that with a lot of the early electronic music. I mean, the tuning was all over the place in a lot of electronic music, because if you wanted to get samples in time, then you had to have things at different pitch and all that kind of stuff. So it depends how precise you want to get with this stuff, really. But there's no rule that says you have to tune the drums. Well, so it depends on the music, but obviously for 4/4 house and techno, the kick drum is the most important thing. That's the driving force that you hear in a club, is a kick drum. So I'm looking for nice punch, a good punch, but also nice bottom end as well. So nice, like I said, that sweet spot um, has to be around some of those nice subby frequencies that sound good. So I mean, there's lots of them depending on the sound of the track and whatever. But that's what I'm looking for. Is like punch, good sub bass, and just a nice sound that's gonna, like, I turn it up loud and I hear it and I'm like, yeah, that's a beefy kick drum. Um, so yeah. Okay, so if you're right, so if your sample gets drowned out by another sound, right? So this is a good way of thinking, right? So what you should be doing, and this is a problem that a lot of people get into, is they're trying to fight for the maximum volume in their mix all the time. They're turning stuff up, and then they're turning stuff up, they're turning stuff up, turning stuff up. That's the wrong way to do it. The way to do it is to turn stuff down, right? To balance stuff down. So like I did, when everything got a bit loud, I grabbed everything together and I turned it down together, and then I've left plenty of headroom in my mix, for you know for adding things, if I need to. So you turn everything down. So if everything's getting a bit loud in the mix, just select the first track and the last track and turn it down together like that. So you hit the first track and then the last track, and then shift, hit the first track and then hold down shift, hit the last track, and then you can move all the faders down together. And that's a nice way of just making sure that you turn your whole mix down together. You should always leave a little bit of headroom, and not try and turn stuff up too much to bustle in the mix. And once you've done that stuff and you're getting stuff that is kind of getting in the way of other stuff, then you can use EQing techniques and sidechain compression and that kind of stuff to move stuff out of the way. But before we get to that, it's it's very important to just get the balance right in the track before we move further. So we have got dropping the laptop there. Got 4 minutes left, so I'm sure we've got some more questions. Right, I'm glad you learned a lot. That's always the main aim. If we can get you learning, that's a good thing, you know. Right, so how can you show? Right, so that thing that I did before, um, that drum bus is really good for that. It's a very simple way, and if you want to just put that on a kick drum, that's fine as well. So let's get rid of that group, and let's just take the kick drum. Although I like that group, maybe I'll save that before I do that. But yeah, basically, the key is to use EQ, maybe some compression. Um, Corpus is good as well. I'm going to show you how to use that a little bit later on in the course. But for the beginning, just play around with that drum bus because look, so that drum bus is fattened up all my drums. Okay, there's a bit more crunch. Before that drum bus, much before the drum bus, after the drum bus. That boom will really fatten up your kick drum. That's a good start. So I would just focus on that. But other things, EQ, obviously. Corpus is good for adding sub. A bit of saturator. There's some compression as well. So yeah, there's many ways of doing it. We're going to explore them later on in the course. But I would, for now, mess around with the drum bus. It's a very easy, quick fix of getting things to sound fatter. And you can just, if you want, you could just chuck it on one drum as well. You don't have to use it on a whole group of drums. And use, the facilities that you've got there for you already. I'm just going to save that again because that drum bus, I like the sound of that. So what's the biggest mistake, challenge when starting out that you notice? Right, so I think people, right, so it's hard to distinguish between what are rules and what what creativity is. And I think people watch a lot of YouTube videos and they're told you have to EQ your bass this way or you have to do that way and you have to do something that way. And I think people kind of follow them to the letter. So I think the biggest mistake is not really being able to discern between what the real rules are in music production, which there aren't that many of, and what is just the noise of people telling them to do too much at once. I think that's probably the biggest mistake. Also, thinking they can do everything at once. It takes time to produce music, and if you think you can, be an amazing producer in a few months. I mean, I'd say maybe it's the odd talented person that can, but most people, learning to use the software and being able to put a track together is quite a long way off being, reaching their maximum potential as a producer. So it can take years. So just, be patient, spend time learning your craft. It's really important. Okay, people, look, so that is the end of the masterclass. So always a pleasure and great to do a masterclass, I suppose, and it's been a lot of fun. So hopefully you all learned something from that, and I'll catch up with you in our one-to-ones in a couple of weeks' time and next week's masterclass. So peace out, people. Take it easy.